most of us in here know at least someone who has been influenced by drugs or has actually used drugs. But a lot of these drugs have limitations or a certain law. Like for example, I know outside this building, there's a sign that says like no smoking, 25 feet from this building. So that's why we should think about how good these laws or these limitations really are. My claim of fact is that drug laws are ineffective. My first secondary claim is that drug use affects the economy in a negative way. It also affects education, and it also affects the way that regulations are actually effective. So for my first secondary claim, I like to say that from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, it states that the total cost of drug abuse and addiction due to use of tobacco, alcohol, and illegal drugs are estimated at $524 billion a year. This emphasizes how huge of an impact it has on the economy as a national basis. So it demonstrates that these laws aren't good enough because the privileges of the drug use are used inappropriately. Another fact that I used was that the Office of National Drug Control Policy stated that $11 billion was used in healthcare costs for drug treatment and drug-related medical consequences, which also led to $61 billion in criminal justice costs. This demonstrates that many who abuse drugs and are helped with aid prove to be unstable for the economy because they aren't taking the matter too seriously. So the government propositions to help aren't being effective and aren't being good enough. The last thing I would like to say for this secondary claim is that full-time workers who were current drug users also were about twice as likely as non-users to skip one or more days of work in the past month. And this was stated in the Office of National Drug Control Policy as well. So this demonstrates that it negatively affects the economy because workers tend to lose interest in going to work and miss out on their employment, which can actually lead to learned employment because people can lose their jobs, which goes back to the drug laws because privileges are misused. The second secondary claim is that drug use affects education in a negative way. Most of us kind of know someone who probably uses a drug because they want to better their education or just be better in class. I took a quote from the Office of National Drug Control Policy where it says that students who are not current marijuana users are more than twice as likely to report an average grade of A than those who are current users of marijuana. So this proposes that laws that reach schools aren't being used effectively and students aren't being productive. So it kind of makes the law seem like they're not really they're not reaching the schools as much as they're supposed to. And then another thing is that Dr. Carl Hart did a research where he took 18 healthy research volunteers, 8 females, 10 males, averaging 24 marijuana cigarettes per week, and completed this 3-session outpatient study. In that study, he concluded that marijuana significantly increased the number of premature responses, which means they responded to a question or a proposed idea fast enough, but he also said that it had no effect on accuracy of measures of cognitive flexibility, which means their thought process wasn't good enough or wasn't accurate. So this demonstrates that the use of drugs for educational purposes don't benefit students, and it kind of makes us think about how drug laws really are proposed around the schools. And the last secondary claim is that regulations aren't effective. from a researcher named Guadalupe COF. He said that among 16 to 21-year-olds in the U.S., alcohol beverage excise taxes have contributed to increase in youth drinking. So what this means is, even though government created limits and added more taxes to alcohol, the effects are still negative, where youth still take or buy alcohol, and which represents the lack of power of the laws. Last thing for this claim is that Louis Bonner from the Center for Survey Research said that 65% of people lived in towns with strong regulation in 1 or 2 policy domains, and while 20% lived in towns with no strong regulations. And here he's talking about smoking. So this represents that not a lot of laws or limitations are proposed in a lot of towns, so it kind of makes it seem that regulations aren't put upon the people good enough. So I'd like to conclude this by saying that drug laws are ineffective, and we should think about how it actually reaches us as the community. Thank you.
All right, Guadalupe, you've identified a proposition, but I'm not exactly sure what inference I'm supposed to draw from the proposition, because it's so open-ended, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of controversy on this particular proposition, that our drug laws are ineffective. I'm not sure if that means that the laws are ineffective because we're not enforcing them, or because it's impossible for them to work, and in what ways that they are ineffective. You've got a mixture of arguments about marijuana, about alcohol, about tobacco, and I'm not exactly sure if your claim is that regulations fail to alter people's behavior, or that they encourage bad behavior, or that there's some negative consequence to having these regulations that has nothing to do with the behavior. It just sounds like it's very generic information about drug policy, without necessarily taking as clear a position as it sounds like you're trying to take. You do kind of label the points as you present them, but I'm having the same difficulty figuring out, well, what's the inference I'm supposed to draw from this? The third point especially was not particularly clear. I got information at one point that says that drug use is really bad. Okay. And then I got another thing that says that people increase their drinking when there are taxes. Okay, so is the inference that if we got rid of the taxes, they drink less? I don't know why drinking more or less is a good or bad idea. I don't know what your position on the policy is about the age that people drink, the price that people pay, the laws against driving under the influence of alcohol. The topic is way too broad, and it's not very focused as to what it is you're trying to say about it. it would probably work better if you picked a particular policy and said, this policy is failing to produce the outcome that we want. I don't even know what outcome you want. Are the laws on alcohol use, are they designed to reduce alcohol consumption, or are they designed simply to make money from alcohol consumption? Which is it? And it's just ambiguous as to what this argument means. There's a lot of data in here, but it seems to be randomly presented without necessarily having a point of view. And there's a claim that you made a couple of times that says privileges are used inappropriately, and I don't even know what privileges you're referring to. It was confusing to me in regard to that. So I see a lot of problems there. Like I said, though, there's a lot of information in the speech. I appreciated that. I thought you used the time pretty well. Like I said at the beginning, it sounds like there's a clear proposition, but everything else just feels fuzzy in the body of the speech, and that's going to make it hard for people somebody to respond because it's not quite clear what the issue is. Even though the claim is stated, I don't think the issue is very clear. All right, sorry, it took me a long time to get through that. I'm still cold. Andrew Kirby, in case we have more than one Andrew.